guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Francesca and I'm originally from the Channel Islands. I'm British, you can probably tell from my accent, but I currently live here in Paris. I moved here 2 years ago for my master's degree, which I graduated from middle of December, and I'll be starting my first big girl job in January. So because obviously I have first-hand experience studying in the French higher education system, I thought it'd be fun and maybe interesting for you to do a video on the pros and cons of studying at university in France. Now, I only have experience in public universities. I went to the University of Paris-Nanterre, which is a public university here in France, so obviously the things that I'm going to be talking about might not be applicable if you studied in a private institution or if you're looking at studying in a private institution, which are normally quite different. Let's start this video on a positive, and this is an obvious one. It was like the biggest positive for me, in my opinion, and that is the price. The price of higher education here is so inexpensive, especially for public schools. Private schools, les grandes écoles, they are more expensive. They're more typically the same sort of price you would expect from a UK or US institution. However, public universities in France are practically free in comparison. So when I studied for my master's, which was a 2-year program, I think I paid around 300 euros per year in tuition fees, and then I paid maybe another 150 euros in something called like a contribution to campus life, which is almost like a tax that you pay as a student. In the past couple of years, they have actually increased the tuition fees for international students. At the beginning, a lot of public universities didn't raise their fees, but I think now more and more of them have raised their fees. But even so, it's still only a couple of thousand euros per year. For a bachelor's degree, it's 2,770 euros per year, and that will be a 3-year course. And for a master's, which is normally a 2-year course, it's 3,770 euros per year. And the reason why the public universities here are so cheap is because they're funded by the state. It's like an extension of middle schools and high schools and primary schools. The state subsidises them. The state does the same with public universities. So leading on to our first con, and this is kind of linked to the fact that they are publicly funded and a lot cheaper, you can kind of tell that they have a budget. I studied for my undergraduate degree at the University of Kent in England, which was a very modern university. It was only about 60 years old. And, you know, it had these big, beautiful buildings that were very modern, with modern lecture theatres and modern seminar rooms and lovely theatres and cinemas and libraries, which wasn't really the same when I came to Nanterre. So for example, in Kent, every room was equipped with recording equipment. So if you weren't in your lecture, the lecturer normally would record it and post it online. If you needed to catch up and study, if you'd missed something taking notes, it was there accessible to you. Yeah, there was none of that at my university in France. I think tired is a nice way to describe how some of the buildings were. They were, even though they were the same sort of ages as Kent, you could tell that they didn't have the budget maybe to maintain them in the same way, and there wasn't the budget either to invest in things like recording equipment and fancy seating in rooms. It was tables, chairs, whiteboard, sometimes a chalkboard. Okay, so my second positive point about studying in France, and this is a huge one again, is the compensation system when it comes to your marks. This is completely different to anything I'd experienced. I didn't even know that this existed. I went in completely blind. So in the UK, you passed your classes, and if you don't pass your classes, you can take retakes at the end of the year in the summer term, and you pay for these retakes, and your retakes are capped at 40%, so that you're not using it as just an opportunity to have longer to study. However, here in France, you don't actually need to pass every single class in order to pass your degree. You're marked on a scale of 0 to 20, with 10 being the pass mark, and that's also called la moyenne. And so the system of compensation basically works that all of your classes and your grades are averaged out for the semester, and then both of your semesters are averaged out to give you your overall year grade. So what that means is if you, say, failed one class but did well enough in another class that it averaged out to a 10 or more overall, you've passed. And if all of your marks didn't add up to 10 on average at the end of the year, you would go sit something called the rattrapage, which is basically a resit, and you would be forced to resit an exam in every single subject that you hadn't got 10 or more in. The thing with la rattrapage is that it's not capped. So you could get 16, 17, 18 if you tried hard enough and just really bring up your overall average grade. I personally love this compensation system, and I benefited from it hugely in my first year. My first year of my master's, the first time particularly, was just such a culture shock and I had no idea what was going on. And I struggled, I really struggled. So there were some classes where I didn't get 10 or more in and I didn't do very well. And I was gutted because I've always been a very good student throughout my academic career, I suppose. So to then fail things was crushing. But I started to get the hang of it, and as I got more comfortable, I did a lot better and my marks, brought me up and I compensated and passed overall. However, obviously there's a con link to this as well. I don't like the way in which the teachers grade you in France. I come from a system that's very involved in encouraging its students and being positive and focusing on the positives. France isn't like that. It's here's what you did wrong and that's it. The way that a lot of teachers grade you, and a lot of them talk to me and said this is how we grade you, is they kind of start at 20 and deduct between a half a point to a point for every error or mistake that is in your exam or in your paper. Obviously these can be subjective as well. The teacher decides what he agrees with or what he doesn't agree with. For example, I had one teacher who deducted half a point because apparently my answer was too long and wordy, despite the fact that all the information was there. There's also no quality control, I can't remember the word for it. So your teacher grades your paper and that's it. There's no system of all of the teachers in the department then get together and average out to make sure that they're grading at the same level. So this next point is kind of a mix of pro and con depending on where you sit on this, and that's that we barely wrote any essays. For me this verges on con because I'm a big essay writer. I think essay writing is one of the better ways in which you can examine a student because the student is able to go away, use resources, research, and is just developing more skills, in my opinion. And especially within academia, I think that that's an important thing to know how to do. I do think you should grade students on a mix of essay writing, exams, presentations, which is also how I'm used to doing it. But here it was pretty much exams. We just did exams and it would be like one exam for the class and that's it. So if you fail it, off to le rattrapage. So to end this video on a positive note, because we've got to try and be more positive going into the new year, the French system really focuses on employability, which is amazing, especially as a young graduate. It's scary going into the world of work afterwards. So the fact that the French system so heavily focuses on getting a job and developing employer-friendly skills is really helpful. The way in which they really focus on employability is the way in which their courses are set up. So for example, you have some courses which are structured with something called an alternance, which is a work-study program where you might do a rotation of, say, 1 week in class, 2 weeks a job, 1 week in class, 2 weeks a job, and do that for the whole year. And your employer, I believe, I don't know a lot of details about this because I didn't do an alternance, but I do believe that your employer actually funds you and pays you. You're treated like an employee. And obviously you gain skills that you can then put on your CV. And when this isn't offered, you're usually still asked to complete something called a stage or an internship as part of your course. So I had 2 opportunities to complete internships during my course. In our first year, it wasn't compulsory, but I decided to do one anyway for credits. It was the choice between doing an internship or an essay, and so I chose an internship and I interned with a small company, a startup, where I translated a lot of their documents into English. And then in my second year, our internship was compulsory and it actually was, in the end, a third of our total credits for that year. Obviously the internship was a little bit different because of COVID, but it was still a really good experience. I got to spend, I think, about 6 weeks in the office before we had to start working from home. But when I was working from home, even then, I learned a huge amount of valuable transferable skills and made good friends, and also made industry connections, which is super important, especially if you're graduating and trying to find a job during a pandemic. So that is it for my video of pros and cons about studying in France. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to leave them below and I will do my best to get back to you. You can also go follow me on Instagram. It's also Francesca. I update there a little bit more regularly, so if you want to see sort of day-to-day and behind-the-scenes stuff, go and give me a follow over there. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I hope you have a lovely day and have a very happy new year and that you're all staying safe. Bye friends.